Predlagam, da gremo k prvemu predavanju. Prosim predavatelje, da se držijo časovnice. Jaz bom mogoče pomagal s sufliranjem, koliko je še časa do konca. Publiko pa prosim, da pripravite vprašanja, morda na svojih telefonih ali pa potem tudi v živo. Hvala. Silvija.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me. And I'm really delighted and honored to be here with you and to talk about. Sorry. Just a second. Well, I'm honored to be here today with you, and I thank Mojca for inviting me. I'm really happy to talk about our experiences with the public perception studies that we conducted at the Croatian Forest Research Institute where I work. And we were dealing with urban forestry studies at the Institute for more than 10 years, let's say maybe 15 years, continuously. So at the beginning, just why we need to focus on public perception studies. A few years ago, I had a bilateral cooperation project with your neighbors, Slovenian Forestry Institute, and we conducted the analysis of all sorts of publications dealing with urban forests and green space, not only scientific papers, but also diploma theses, books, book chapters, and so on. And we try to identify the main topics that we are dealing in our two countries. And one of those topics, but not the prominent one, was public perspectives. Hence, for this presentation, I decided to focus on public perception studies, and at the Croatian Forest Research Institute we have two big projects dealing with that topic, and the other one all just started, the third one. So I will start with the one that was for us the beginning of such studies. It was conducted more than 10 years ago, but it is important in many ways, as you will see later. It was coordinated by the European Forest Institute as part of the capacity building project for forest research organizations and educational organizations in the Western Balkan region. As you know, the definition of the Western Balkans is constantly changing. At that time, the western border of the Western Balkan area was Croatia. So Slovenia was already in EU, so it was not included in this program. We had a rather small budget, but we started with idea of some urban forestry topic that was the first, let's say, at our institute and in many institutes in the region. So we had partners, forestry faculties and research institutes in Croatia, Bosnia, Serbia, Montenegro, and Macedonia. At that time, we also had some external help, like external assistance from several researchers. First of all, it was Professor Konajndenaik. Many of you heard about him. He's a well-known, globally well-known expert in urban forestry. The other one was Professor Maureen McDonough from the Michigan State University in US, who helped with the social science methodology, and from your own organization, from the biotechnical faculty, with the statistical analysis, we had help from Professor Špele-Pezevšek Malovrh. And this was the one of the kind study that was conducted mainly in capitals, but also the regional capitals. So it was Zagreb, Sarajevo, Belgrade, Skopje, Podgorica, but also regional capitals of Banja Luka and Novi Sad. And we did the combination of focus group interviews with citizens in each city And based on those results, we conducted a face-to-face survey in public areas with members of the public. So it was conducted during the very hot summer of 2012. But altogether, we had close to 2,700 respondents, and the sample was stratified in a way that it was distributed according to the population of the city districts in each city. What we could control at the moment on the street, let's say, was the gender distribution. So it is pretty close to the census data. And here are some of the results. At that time, we realized that urban forests and green space are really important for our respondents, but they are not that confident that their city could be considered as a green city in terms of the amount. The perception of the city was more or less that they are not green cities. And they perceived in many of those cities that the amount of urban forests and green space is decreasing. So they expressed also the need for more urban forests and green space. When it comes to green space maintenance and forest management, in all cities it received really small, low values, and forest management was consistently perceived as worse in comparison to green space maintenance. They also perceived all sorts of problems in those focus groups with urban forests and green space. And some of the suggestions, what we can do to improve the current situation is to start with the people, to raise awareness about the importance of urban forests and green space, how to behave properly there, and to focus on educational campaigns for all age groups, starting from the kindergarten upwards. And also it was important for them to have more community wardens, which means people who are responsible for rule enforcement and rule compliance in urban forests and green space. When it comes to those issues, those red are actually where people agreed or fully agreed. You can see all sorts of problems were present in all of those cities, but the importance, the ranking of those problems was different in each city. But what was the common for all of those cities, and we didn't expect that, was that the number one issue was vandalism, behaving badly in urban forests and green space. It was followed by some problems with lack of urban equipment or recreational infrastructure, but again, also one of the main problems was how other people in green space behave. What was less pronounced was some issues that are more, let's say, something that is the focus of professionals and less the focus of the public, like selection of tree species, or let's say connectivity between different urban green space in the city and so on. And even in some cases, for instance, in Zagreb, access to green space was not really an issue. Other issues that they mentioned were mainly related to dogs in all sorts of sense, like a bad behavior of dog owners, having dogs off leash, dog fouling, having dogs in dog restricted areas, and so on, and even problems with stray dogs in Sarajevo. Other issues were related to green space maintenance that was considered as poor by citizens, and in some cases lack of funding for the maintenance. And after all, the poor green space maintenance. when we analyze the differences between the cities, I will not bore you with very long tables, but we analyzed those differences, and there were statistically significant differences in perception between those cities. So we find more differences than similarities and in those cities. And when it comes to the effect of age, gender, education, household income, it was important only to some extent. Again, a lot of long tables that I'm skipping. Another important result for us, and somewhat surprising, I have to remind, it was 2012. And when we asked them about the participation in decision making, whether they participated and how, the vast majority never participated up to that time in any sort of decision-making process related to urban forests and green space, which is kind of, it's not surprising. It's still not surprising, but I believe maybe if we repeat the same study now, the results would be a little bit changed. But also when we ask them in what way they participate, it is mainly reactionary, it is not proactive participation in decision making in a sense, but mainly protests, petitions, when something happens that they perceived as wrong with urban forests and green space, then they have a reaction. We also asked them whether they participate. Another important and interesting result is responsibility from team maintenance. Again, I'm reminding this is 2012, year 2012, and it was somewhat surprising that even at that time, citizens perceived that the responsibility for tree care in their cities is not only on the city. So they wanted to have somehow to be a part of that and to have the shared responsibility between citizens and those city communal companies. As you can see, this red bar is between 66 and even 75% of respondents who are for those shared responsibilities, and also a small percentage of those in green are related to those who said that citizens should be responsible for the tree maintenance. At least to me, it was something that now would be more pronounced, but at that time it was also that they think that they should be somehow involved, even though they were not. And a very simple question, whether you participated in tree planting in any way in the past 2 years. And surprisingly, not many people actually participated in tree planting. If we do the same study now, there's a lot of tree planting initiatives, at least in Croatia, even in rural and both in urban and rural areas. And now probably the result would be somewhat different. Everyone who wanted to participate had the opportunity to participate and to plant a tree, but at that time it was not the case. However, they were willing to participate in such activities related to trees. And to conclude about this project, you may ask yourself why I'm talking about the project that was finished more than 10 years ago, but it was first, and so far it was the only comparative city-level study of public perception of urban forests and green space in the region that we addressed. So we considered it somewhat as a baseline study. It was innovative in many ways in the research process. It was completely developed by young researchers. Most of us were only doctoral students, many were master's students, a majority of forestry background, and it was like learning by doing project where we together collaboratively developed a project from the project proposal to the implementation, did the coordination of the project, financial management, and so on. So it was in many ways beneficial for us. And before that, we did not have any formal cooperation with people and researchers in those other countries after the war. Also, it was innovative in the methodology that was used. At that point, before that time, we did not use in our institutes and organizations in the region social science methodologies in this forestry, or let's say urban forestry context. And also I would say it was really a quick and dirty, study where we were able to feel the pulse of the public and where it goes. But based on the methodology, where you have like 10 minutes on the street with the person, you cannot go too deep. So what we missed is the connection between the perception and the location for that perception. And hence, as soon as we were able, we applied for another project. It was a big 5-year project that was conducted only in Zagreb between 2018 and 2022. I just talked with Professor Pirnat before before the conference started. Maybe less than 10 years ago, Professor Pirnat organized a IALE workshop here at the biotechnical faculty, and I participated in that workshop, and I was introduced with the idea of this participatory mapping. A person from Finland talked about that, and I thought this is what we need actually to conduct in Zagreb, and I applied for the national funding. It was a Croatian Science Foundation project in 2017, and the goal of that program, it is called Installation Research Project. The goal was actually to establish the research group of people who will deal with a certain topic. And we had 2 doctoral students and also 1 senior researcher. So we were a rather small group. So the minimum for this call was to have 3 persons. So we had 4. Yeah. Also, we had a lot of collaboration with external experts in areas that we are not familiar with. For instance, developing an application it asks for certain skills that we did not have, like coding or application development. It was done mostly through another project at the Humboldt University of Berlin. To some extent, we had collaboration with the University of Łódź in Poland and the University of Helsinki with Dr. Korpilo, who is an expert in public participatory mapping studies. So we addressed cultural ecosystem services and these services, and only some of those, because it is complicated. Even those 5 that we selected was pretty much to handle. And the goal of that project was to identify, quantify, and map those selected services, and these services based on public perception and also based on green space types. So many studies at that time addressed only one type, like one park or only parks, and not that much city level study were rare, and also studies that included both services and the services at the same time. So again, we did the combination of the combined approach, where we first conducted the focus groups with citizens. So we went to each city district in Zagreb at least once and talked with people in that city districts about their green space. And we were interested how people connect urban green spaces with our cultural ecosystem services that we are interested in. Altogether, it was almost 100 participants. It may seem not much, but it took us almost all year 2019 to organize all those 20 focus groups, to conduct it and to do everything else that is needed after you finalize the focus groups, the transcriptions, the qualitative data analysis, and so on. What we have is that the people who participated were more or less balanced by gender, but younger people were underrepresented, and also those who are highly educated and older people, retired people, were overrepresented, which is kind of a normal, in those kind of studies. Also, people who participated in our focus groups were really knowledgeable about their city districts, because on average they live more than 30 years in the city district and more than 40 years in Zagreb. So they were really valuable respondents. During the interviews, we also did the exercise of participatory mapping. So when we asked them about for instance, what urban green spaces they love the most, what they used for recreational purposes, what are the most beautiful, and so on, they also had to map those on the map of their city district. An example on the left, you can see the example for one city district. And here you can see those dots in different colors are different ecosystem services. I'm missing these services on this map, but it is just for the illustration. And later on, it was digitalized on the map of the entire city of Zagreb. And you can see how those services are distributed. Also, when they talked about those ecosystem services, they also had to explain why they find it beautiful, why they use it for recreational purposes, and so on. And here you can see some examples for services of place attachment and recreation on the city map and based on the type of urban green space. So you can see that all sorts of types of urban green space people can be attached to and can use for recreational purposes. So these are not only the usual suspects like parks and forests. And here we come to those attributes. And the upper part of the slide, you can see attributes that people, those why questions, the attributes that people attached to urban green spaces in relations to different ecosystem services, and why people get attached to urban green space. Most of all because they have some positive memories. These are nice places for walking. It is well maintained. It has some facilities for recreation, for walking. It is nearby. So recreation, for all those services, recreation is the underlying goal. So they go there for recreational purposes, but then at the same time they again enjoy their ecosystem services such as aesthetics or learning about nature and so on. What we also found that trees are very important in general and also for space. Also having specific tree species that people prefer, colorful leaves with the red leaves, or flowers like magnolia tree, Japanese cherry tree, and so on. And what is for people is the presence of water bodies. People like water bodies in general. Regarding the education and cultural identity, those were services that people talked less. They talked more about their most important places where that they use for recreation or they find beautiful or love for some reason. But when it comes to education and learning about the nature, it is not something that they thought a lot about that. Maybe because people usually associate education with something formal, like it happens in the formal setting, in schools, in educational organizations. But the attributes of urban green space that could be used for educational purposes and learning about the nature is, for instance, closeness to schools and other educational organizations, presence of water bodies or some interesting geological information. Historical parks are useful for that, botanical gardens, and so on. And for the cultural identity, they identified urban green spaces that are somehow the symbol of their neighborhood. Everyone knows where it is. It is very popular to go there, and sometimes also for recreational purposes. So these are like places of social for in general and urban legend. Oh, you can see how they distributed those services in terms of types of urban green space. So I think 16 different types of urban green space were identified during those focus groups and were attached to different types, different ecosystem services. You can see that people all sorts of types of urban green. These services at the beginning of the presentation, but soon that we will not focus only on these services because the services of urban green space are only a small portion of all the negative perceptions that people may hold towards the urban forests and green space. So we were able to classify somehow to make the groups of negative perceptions what makes. So it's in our case mostly due to people dog fouling, doing all sorts of incivilities in the green space, and also received absence or insufficient maintenance. Were the most important to our respondents, and what the least important or least pronounced was the lack of likely to be by older people, women, and people with small children. But in general, that was not the most important topic. And in the end, we came to this all those previous studies, all these focus groups and everything actually was used to develop this public participatory GIS application that we called My Dynamic City Zagreb. And it was developed, like I said, with the people from Humboldt University of Berlin, who are geographers. And they helped us with the development of this application. For us, we think it is really successful because it was conducted in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2021. But we were able to have close to 400 participants and almost 6,000 spatial markers were related. Again, we addressed those cultural ecosystem services and several these services. Here is how it looks on the maps of the city of Zagreb for different ecosystem services. For each, they could choose up to 3 green spaces or forests to map. So it was not possible to map as many as they wanted. And even this was really complicated to analyze and handle later. And this is one of the most interesting results from the project. Here you can see the distribution of those collected spatial markers per ecosystem service and the service that we analyzed, and also related to urban green space types. And we identified about 20 different types of urban green infrastructure. This light green, the most markers went to parks. So people associated the majority of the markers to parks and somewhat less to forests and park forests. And it was also important to show these gray areas are related to informal green space. That was also important for them. And why parks? Because in Zagreb we have parks in each city district. I thought we have 40 minutes, so I have 10 minutes more. So I'm paying attention, thank you. So in Zagreb we have parks in each city district, so they are nearby to people's homes, and we all know that people go to nearby, mostly to nearby green spaces and forests are usually on the outskirts. In Zagreb it is on the mountain Medvednica, but it's not that easy to come here, to come there. If you want to use maybe only an hour, you don't go to mountain Medvednica for hiking, so you go to the nearby park or some other type of green space that is very close to where you live, especially with the kids. And we also developed in that project a handbook about the participatory mapping, what you need to know before you start with the participatory mapping and how to use it in urban and green space planning and management. We also conducted the workshop with only in Croatian, but it's available. And we also conducted the workshop with stakeholders in Zagreb about this about this handbook, and they also gave their feedback on that. And in the end, to summarize, this project was innovative because it was a bottom-up, citizen-based instead of expert-based, because most of the studies before that time were expert-based assessments of services and the services. It combined several ecosystem services and the services at the same time. It addressed at the same time all sorts of types of urban green infrastructure. It was conducted on a city level and not just one park. It also helped to develop this locally specific application, public participatory GIS application that we called My Dynamic City Zagreb. The results show that it's important to have all sorts of types of urban green infrastructure, and urban planning is supposed to deliver, all those types, not having just parks, but also those walking areas along the streams are really important. And we have several streams and people use it very much, but not much attention is paid in terms of maintenance and protection of those urban green spaces. It also showed the importance of management and maintenance, placekeeping, to putting a lot of effort to have well-maintained and well-managed urban forests and green space. And people also more focused on services than on the services. People more focused on positive side of the story and less on the negative. So it's only a small share of problems or negative perceptions that they addressed in terms of three ecosystem services. However, we're not able to, it's not possible to achieve a representativeness of the sample in terms of the population of the city level. Also, I don't know of any study at the moment, maybe some are, but in terms of the green space, all studies that I show were usually non-representative, because when you have online and also mapping study, you attract a certain type of people. Let's say those are highly educated and usually, and maybe younger people than, let's say, older people who are, I'm not discriminating, but sometimes they are not that tech savvy, in comparison to younger generations. And also it was conducted during the pandemic, so it was not possible to go and to talk with people and actually help them to fill in this, to use the application. That was the original idea, but because of the pandemic, it was not possible. Also, we found those focus groups and discussion with citizens really rewarding, but you have to pay attention that it is really time consuming. And the amount of data that you receive, you can use for the next 10 years, for the analysis. But it allows also mutual learning between the participants and between us, researchers, and the participants, and learn a lot from them. Also about the locally important urban green space. We all know about Park Maksimir, Bundek, Jarun Lake, and everyone in Zagreb knows about those areas. But those small green spaces that are really important for the neighborhood, you cannot know about that if you don't go and ask people. And to conclude about the PPGIS, it's really versatile and good tools, but it takes some skills and a lot of time for programming and also GIS skill if you want to develop your own application. There are some applications that are available that can be somehow adjusted to your research, but we usually don't have funds, for those kind of applications. And also we wanted to learn how to do it, almost from the scratch. Also, participatory mapping cannot replace the other modes of public participation, especially in urban planning, but it also just adds the additional layer in the decision-making process. So that's the one. The last one slide is the new project that we have. It is also about participatory mapping, but we are focusing on forest parks. And we want to go more in detail and to connect this participatory mapping with the traits of forest parks. It will not be done in Zagreb for the first time, because most of our studies are done in Zagreb, so we want to move a little bit to other areas in the Mediterranean area, in Gorski Kotar, in other areas where we have those forest parks. The group is more or less the same. And just for the future, last slide, what we think that comes next, what we want to focus more. If possible, we want to focus more to have more representative sample. However, sometimes I think it's almost impossible, especially if you don't have professional polling agency. Most of those studies do not use professional polling agency, and hence that you are not able to achieve. You always have the usual suspects, who participate in such sort of studies. Let's say older people prefer more to come to face-to-face studies, and those online studies are attracting different people. We also think that we should pay attention to include different age groups and different segments of our population, such as younger people, minors, people with disabilities. We did not have those in any of those studies, and also immigrants, because in Croatia we have, 400,000 people, immigrants who are working in Croatia, who are living among us, using the green space, and we don't know anything about them, how they use it and how they perceive this. And this is something that we think we want to focus more in future, because it is a significant portion of our rather small population in Croatia. And also I would always support and think it's important to get also urban planners and green space managers on board in such studies. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope I was within the time. And my voice did not fail me, so I'm happy. So if you have any questions, I will be here also today and tomorrow. Or you can ask me an email, or you can ask me now. Thank you so much.
Hvala, Silvija.